So we're going to set up for the types of elements lab. So the first thing I'm going to do is add it to my table of contents. So this is the 8th lab that we've done. And this is called the types of elements. And it's going to start on page 23. Okay, so I'm going to turn to page 23 and I'm going to start by writing my title at the top. So types of elements. And then I'm going to write today's date. So we're probably doing this lab on November 1st or November 2nd, 2016. So then the first thing that comes after that is your purpose. And the purpose of this lab is to classify different elements as metals, metalloids, or non-metals. So the purpose of this lab is to classify elements as metals, metalloids, and non-metals. So we already might have an idea of what makes something a metal or a non-metal, but a metalloid might be a new term, and a metalloid is something that's kind of in between a metal or a non-metal. For our hypothesis, we're going to go ahead and predict what we think each element is going to be. So for our hypothesis, we have how many different types of elements? We're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different types of elements. So we're going to predict aluminum, carbon, copper, gallium, lead, magnesium, silicon, sulfur, and tin. And what I want you to do is, based on what you know about metals and nonmetals and what a metalloid might be, I want you to predict for each of these 9 elements whether it's going to be a metal, a metalloid, or a nonmetal. Don't go look them up. That spoils the fun. What we're looking for is a prediction. Based on what you already know, which types do you think these are? After you've made your prediction, we're going to go ahead and put our procedure in. I'm going to go ahead and cut mine just so that it doesn't take up quite as much room. So I'm going to go ahead and cut my materials off. I'm going to put my materials on this page. Then I'm going to turn the page and I'm going to put my procedure on the next page. Then after my procedure, we're going to put in observations. Now this lab is a little bit different. This lab is based primarily on observations. So in your observation section here, I really want you to make note of what things were surprising, what things didn't behave as you expected them to behave. So for this lab, we're basically going to do a series of tests for each different element. So our procedure walks through the different steps for each element. And then you're going to go back and you're going to repeat the steps for each different type of element. And then at the end, you're going to, based on what you learn, determine whether you think they're a metal, a non-metal, or a metalloid. So I'm going to go ahead and give you your data table. So here's your data table. It has each of the elements we're going to test. And we're going to look at the appearance, whether or not it conducts electricity, whether or not it's malleable, which means it's bendy, so can you bend it? We're going to look at whether we can crush it using a mortar and pestle. We're going to look at whether or not it reacts with acid. And then after all of those tests, we're going to look at the properties and group them by whether or not we think they're a metal, a nonmetal, or a metalloid. And that's what's going to go in your last column. So to make your data table fit into your lab notebook a little bit better, we're going to go ahead and fold this in half. And then we're going to glue it onto the next page. So your observations here are the things that are surprising or unexpected. And then on this page, we're going to put our data table in. So I'm going to label it as my data table, and so it's folded, so I'm going to glue this back side. So I'm really only gluing half of the sheet for the data table into my lab notebook. And so once that's glued in, now I can open this up and I can see the full data table. And then I can close it when I go to flip the page for my lab notebook. So then after your data table, we're not going to have any sort of graph for this, it's just the data table. So then after your data table will come your summary. And then your accepted results will be in Schoology.